Hey, so I hope you enjoyed the reading as much as we can enjoy textbook reading. So there are the three focus questions you guys were looking at. I'm going to jump right into it because I have limited time. So we're looking at Chapter 2, the Constitution of the United States. It's important. It's the foundation for everything we're going to do in government after this. Okay. So what is a constitution? Constitution is what it says up here. It's a formal principles of a government and establishes the basic structures and procedures of how that government operates. So the United States has the U.S. Constitution, written in 1789. It's a formal document. It's actually the oldest living constitution in the world. For instance, the French have had something like 12 different constitutions and 12 different governments since they had the revolution in the 1780s. The British don't have a constitution. They don't have a written constitution. Instead, they have a series of 25 major laws and court decisions starting in 1215 with the Magna Carta and most recently Brexit in 2018. So for the British, those 25 major laws passed by Parliament and decisions by courts establish how their government should work. So there is no one document that you can refer to that says, hey, this is how the United Kingdom works. Instead, you have a whole series of laws that shape the United Kingdom as it is today. A constitutional monarchy where the monarchy doesn't really have power, they're just an advisor, and you have a parliament that has power. So that's what constitutions are. Kind of complicated, but for our purposes, the U.S. Constitution is the most important thing we have to know for this class. And really, we're not doing comparative politics, so we don't have to know about the intricacies of other countries' constitutions, just our Constitution. All right, so declaring independence. Pretty easy. July 4th, 1776, we declare independence. Thomas Jefferson, right here, drew upon Locke and Rousseau. He liberally used their work to write the Declaration of Independence. As we can see from the three principles, all men are created equal and have rights that are unalienable. That's right from John Locke. John Locke's natural human rights, life, liberty, and property. Jefferson changes it a little bit to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because we had one major problem, slavery. How can you talk about all men being equal and having the same rights if some people are slaves? So Jefferson intentionally changed it to the pursuit of happiness to get around the problem of slavery, which they don't even want to talk about in 1776 or 1789 when the Constitution is drafted. They postponed that for 50 years. Pass the buck to somebody else. Let somebody else deal with slavery. Okay. The next major principle is government must be based on the consent of the governed, which is the people. And that actually goes right back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the idea of popular sovereignty, which popular sovereignty is one of your vocabulary words. Sorry. And the last one, if the government isn't protecting the rights of the people, is not protecting the rights of the people, they can abolish that government. So if the government isn't protecting you or helping you, you have the right to abolish it, which kind of ties back to both of these guys, Locke and Rousseau, where, if your rights aren't being protected and you don't have a say in it, you should be able to overthrow your government or abolish your government and create a new one. Which, fun fact, we tried in 1860 with the Civil War and it didn't work. So we don't really have a right to abolish our government. But we'll talk about that later. Okay, state constitutions. So, basically, before we even had the Declaration of Independence, each state had its own charter constitution that they ran their government with. And it's really important during the Revolution because each state then creates a very specific constitution that establishes principles, structures, and operating procedures for their state governments. And were adopted at that time to deal with the war. And also adopted at that time, because I'm going to get to the next slide here right now too, to deal with the fact that the United Kingdom was a strong, centralized government. And so the states responded by creating state constitutions that limited that government, that strong central government. And that's going to play into the development of the Articles of Confederation after the Revolutionary War. And when they create the Articles of Confederation, they want to limit strong central government so that you can't have this all-powerful government that can abuse the people. And so that's really what happens under the Articles of Confederation. Okay, it's highlighted up here because this is one of your key vocabulary words. So you should have your cards in class from now on after today. And this is where you take out your Articles of Confederation card and you can add to it. Okay, you can make little notes on there. And most importantly, you probably should have a second card for the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, because oftentimes in AP Government, especially on the test, we focus more on the weaknesses because that's what led to the U.S. Constitution. So yes, we talk about the structures of the Articles of Confederation, great, but what are the weaknesses and why did that lead to the revolution? Okay. Fun fact real quick, if we had a government from 1781 to 1789, it was the Confederated States of America. There was not the United States of America. So the first president of Congress, because we didn't have a Speaker of the House, we didn't have a majority leader like we do today in Congress and in the Senate and the House. This guy was the president of the Congress. And it's important because we talk about the way it's structured. There is no judicial branch, there's no executive branch. So we go back, Samuel Huntington is kind of the first president, but not really. It's a trivia question for random trivia nerds. You'll never need to know this for the test. I just thought I would throw this in there for real quick entertainment or trivia knowledge. All right, let's go to the structure and authority of the Confederation. So, under the Articles of Confederation, there was a unicameral Congress. This is one of your key vocabulary words. Unicameral means one house. So there was no House and Senate like we have today. There was just Congress. One room, one group of people, not two different rooms with two different groups of people working together like we have today, or even like the United Kingdom has. The United Kingdom has a House of Commons and a House of Lords. The United States has the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And we didn't have that under the Articles of Confederation. It was just the Congress, one group of people. Okay, each state only had one vote. There were a lot of people there, not just one person from each state. There was a delegation from each state, but each state only got one vote in the Congress of the Confederation. Okay. Approving treaties, no problem, 9 out of 13, that's workable. Big deal though, there was no judicial branch, there's no courts, there's no executive branch, and there's no chief executive officer. So there's no president like we have today. So it's just one organization that runs the whole country. Today we have three. There's the president, Congress, and the Supreme Court that balance each other out, and we're going to get into that. You know, separation of powers, checks and balances, very soon. They didn't have that. It was just one. But it was very weak because they couldn't even raise taxes, which is one of the most important things our Congress can do today. So the Congress of the Confederation had no power to raise taxes. Instead, each state had to contribute what they felt was appropriate for themselves if they wanted to contribute to the Congress of the Confederation. So just imagine you have like a group of friends who are going out for food and you have that one cheap friend who doesn't want to contribute. That's kind of what we're dealing with here with the Congress of the Confederation. Some states don't have a lot of money and they don't want to contribute. Okay. And then finally, the important thing, and this is one of the reasons that we're going to talk about in the next slide, there's the downfall of the Articles of Confederation. This is the weakness, is that in order to change the Articles of Confederation, to add to it or take away from that document, that government, you had to have unanimous consent of all 13 colonies. Good luck on that. They never changed anything in the Articles of Confederation because they can never get all 13 colonies to agree. Because remember I said each state had a delegation there. Even amongst the delegate members from individual states, they couldn't even agree to cast one vote. So never once did they change the Articles of Confederation. So that was actually ends up being a weakness of it. Okay, along with not having the power to tax, right here, and also not having a strong central authority and not having a judicial branch. So if we have disagreements between two states, who decides it? Okay, back then we had two states almost go to war with each other during this time period because there was no organization like a judicial branch, a Supreme Court to settle that dispute. It was a border dispute where the line was. It's important for water rights and mineral rights, but there was no court to say, oh yeah, Maryland is right, Pennsylvania's wrong. Okay, so those are again some talks about the structure, but those are some of the actual weaknesses of it. Okay, so the really big weaknesses here are states retained ultimate authority over commerce. They controlled commerce within their state. They also controlled commerce coming into their state, which means they can tax stuff coming into their state. And that's important because if you can tax, that's a way of controlling commerce. Okay. They also controlled taxation from other countries. So some states really enjoyed working with the French, so they didn't tax their goods. Other states were not big fans of the French, so they taxed their goods. So it's really complicated to work with the colonies now, to work with the 13 states. Okay. Each state had its own money. So if we're taxing goods coming out of the state, now we also have to deal with the fact that we have to do exchanges of money. So you had, New York dollars, Massachusetts dollars, you had, Georgia dollars, Maryland dollars. So everyone has their own dollar, and now we're having to exchange. So if you've ever traveled outside the country, you know that not all money is equal. You have exchange rates, and some money is worth more than others. So now we have that problem, plus we're taxing goods coming in out of the states. It's complicated. Business is not happening between states. And it's kind of stifling the United States at this point. No, we're not the United States, but we're stifling progress. And that's one of the problems. Okay. And these policies caused economic hardships. And that brings us to Shays' Rebellion. Okay, Shays was a veteran of the Revolutionary War who was living in Massachusetts. And what happened to him was he was busy fighting a war, so he wasn't on his farm. He comes back to his farm after the war, doesn't have enough money, the bank forecloses on his farm. And you're saying, what's the big deal? You lose your farm, go to work somewhere else. But in order to vote in Massachusetts, you had to be a property owner. So if he didn't own property anymore, he was now disenfranchised. He did not have the right to vote in Massachusetts anymore. And that's why he rebelled. He said, he fought in the Revolutionary War. Taxation without representation was their big slogan. He should have the right to be represented and to have a voice. But because he lost his property, he gets that taken away. So that's where Shays' Rebellion starts. Now, the real weakness comes about from the fact that Massachusetts couldn't even stop the rebellion. They actually had to go and ask the Congress of the Confederation, hey, can you help us? And they said, no, that's your problem. That's an internal problem from the state. That's where states retain their ultimate authority and sovereignty over themselves. You deal with it. So Massachusetts started asking other states, hey, can you help us out? We can't stop this rebellion. And you know what the other states said? No thanks, we're busy, we can't send you any troops. Ultimately what ended up happening was they ended up sending Massachusetts money. Massachusetts hired mercenaries. They went and captured Shays. And in the end, Shays doesn't get executed. They realize they have a problem and they need to create a new government. And that's going to lead us to the development of the Constitution of the United States of America. I hope that helps out a little bit from what you also read. And then we'll talk later on. So have a nice day.